Good afternoon and welcome to TV3 Midday News. We're coming to you live from our news hub at Adesawe, Kanda. I am Wendy Lai. The headlines for this afternoon. Former United Nations Secretary General and Peace Laureate Kofi Annan dies in Geneva, Switzerland. He was 80. And on international front, thousands await rescue at Kerala in southern India as flood tolls tops 20. We've got details of these stories and many more lined up this afternoon. Do stay with us. And we start on a very sad note as former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, has died at age 80. A family source has confirmed to TV3. Now, the late Kofi Annan, who served as the 7th UN chief for almost 10 years, died on Saturday in Geneva, Switzerland, which is today. Now, the Guinean diplomat served as the 7th Secretary General. That's the 70th Secretary General of the United Nations from January 1997 to December 2006. He was the first to emerge from the ranks of United Nations staff to serve as the Secretary General. Kofi Annan and the UN were co-recipients of the 2001 Nobel Peace Prize. He was the founder and chairman of the Kofi Annan Foundation, as well as the chairman of the Elders, an international organization funded by the late Nelson Mandela. The cause of his death has not been disclosed, but Mr. Annan has not been well for some time now. We bring you a short biography of the late Kofi Annan.
Annan was born in Kumasi in central Ghana on April 8, 1938. Kofi Annan is descended from tribal chiefs on both sides of his family. His father was an educated man, and Annan became accustomed to both traditional and modern ways of life. He has described himself as being a tribal in a tribal world. After receiving his early education at a leading boarding school in Ghana, Annan attended the College of Science and Technology in Kumasi. At the age of 20, he won a Ford Foundation scholarship for undergraduate studies at McAllister College in St. Paul, Minnesota, where he studied economics. Even then, he was showing signs of becoming a diplomat or someone skilled in international relations. Kofi Annan received his bachelor's degree in economics in 1961. Shortly after completing his studies at McAllister College, Kofi Annan headed for Geneva, Switzerland, where he attended graduate classes in economics at the Institut Université des Hautes Études Internationales. Following his graduate studies in Geneva, Kofi Annan joined the staff of the World Health Organization, a branch of the United Nations. He served as an administrative officer and a budget officer in Geneva. Later, UN posts took him to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and New York City, New York. Kofi Annan always assumed that he would return to his native Ghana after college, although he was disturbed by the unrest and numerous changes of government that occurred there during the 1970s. Kofi Annan became the Alfred P. Sloan Fellow at Massachusetts University of Technology. At the end of his fellowship in 1972, he was awarded a Master of Science degree in Management. Rather than return to Ghana upon graduation, he accepted a posting at the UN headquarters in New York City. In 1974, he moved to Cairo, Egypt, as Chief Civilian Personnel Officer in UN Emergency Force. Kofi Annan briefly changed careers in 1974 when he left the United Nations to serve as Managing Director of the Ghana Tourist Development Company. Annan returned to international diplomacy and the United Nations in 1976. For the next 7 years, he was associated with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Geneva. He returned to the United Nations headquarters in New York City in 1983 as Director of the Budget in the Financial Service Office. Later in the 1980s, he filled the post of Assistant Secretary General in the Office of Human Resource Management and served as Security Coordinator for the United Nations. In 1990, he became an Assistant Secretary General for another department at the United Nations, the Office of Program Planning, budget and finance. In fulfilling his duties to the United Nations, Kofi Annan has spent most of his adult life in the United States, especially at the UN headquarters in New York City. Kofi Annan had, by this time, filled a number of roles in the United Nations, ranging from peacekeeping to managerial. And in the 1990s, there were no different. In 1990, he negotiated the release of hostages in Iraq following the invasion of Kuwait. 5 years later, he oversaw the transition of the United Nations Protection Force to the Multinational Implementation Force, IFOR, a UN peacekeeping organization. In this transfer of responsibility, operations in the former Yugoslavia were turned over to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. In recognition of his abilities, Kofi Annan was appointed Secretary General to the top post of the UN by the UN Secretary General in December 1996. He began serving his 4-year term of office on January 1st, 1997. Joining him was his second wife, former lawyer Nanny Lagergren of Sweden. She is the niece of the diplomat Roel Wallenberg of 1912 to 1947, who saved thousands of European Jews from the German Nazis during World War II, when American-led forces fought against Germany, Italy, and Japan. The late Kofi Annan and Lagergren were married in 1985 and had one child.
Now let's bring you a lot more on the passing of Kofi Annan, and there's a statement from the family, and I read that shortly for you. That there you have it, a statement from his family, and Kofi Annan was a global statement and deeply committed to, let me take that again, and Kofi Annan was a global statesman and a deeply committed internationalist who fought throughout his life for a fairer and more peaceful world. During his distinguished career and leadership of the United Nations, he was an ardent champion of peace, sustainable development, human rights, and the rule of law. The family also mentioned that Kofi Annan was a son of Ghana and felt a special responsibility towards Africa. He was particularly committed to African development and deeply engaged in many initiatives, including his chairmanship of the Africa Progress Panel and his early leadership for the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA. And on the passing of the former UN General Secretary and Peace Laureate Kofi Annan, panelists on TV3's current affairs program New Day paid a tribute to the Ghanaian diplomats who exhibited a cautious style of diplomacy. The late Kofi Annan is sometimes criticized for his soft-spokenness, which some say may be mistaken for his weakness.
Politicians should emulate him. Ghanaian politicians should be able to emulate him. I'm lost for words. I don't know what to say. He brought the stature of Ghana up when he was UN Secretary General. And he made sure that he did what was right by the country.
And he brought a certain finesse and class to the role.
It brought Ghanaians into the limelight. Anywhere you pass, Secretary General is from Ghana. Just like the Rollinses of this world, the Nkrumahs of this world. It brought Ghana into a different dimension. So it is sad we've lost an illustrious son. But I do not know what's happening this year. We are losing quite a lot of our illustrious people. So maybe it's the age, but the celebrated poet, yes. What's his name? Atukwe Okai. He also is gone. So I hope we learn from some of these illustrious sons of Ghana so that at least those coming up would have role models to follow.
My respect for Kofi Annan shot up when I first visited the Genocide Museum in Rwanda. The role he played. He was UN Under-Secretary during that time. It was amazing. They have write-ups, his speeches, and I stood there and I felt so proud as a Ghanaian that in another country they are celebrating him for the role he played before, during, and after, where he said he thinks he is personally responsible for what happened in Rwanda, and he will make sure that every resource available to him, he would bring it to bear. And the people understand and appreciated him. And I think Ghana has lost a gem. I am happy that when he resigned, or when his tenure ended from the UN, he came back home and then did what he had to do to contribute locally to the development of the country by taking up that post at the University of Ghana.
Kofi Annan was a great man. I met him once, many years ago, in a program in London, many years ago. This is somebody who humbly, once he gets to know, he looks at, I think, Ghanaians, probably you can easily identify another Ghanaian. I mean, he came around, shook hands with me many years ago. And if you look at him, someone who rose to the level of a UN Secretary General, he came home, very often, and he interacted with our leaders. I think there were times when he needed to caution the political leaders in this country to let them know that, it is just one Ghana, and so we are an envy to the world. And so for me, probably I would say Kofi Annan never dies, because most of the things he did would forever live on. And I think one of the panelists did mention that the current politician, the current crop of politicians have a lot to learn from.
A lot more on this story, and joining me via phone is international relations expert Professor Vladimir Inchidanso. Thanks for agreeing to speak with us, Prof.
Thanks for having me.
Now, first of all, I want to find out from you, how did you get the news, and personally, how do you feel about it?
Well, I was driving to my hometown when the news hit me, and it was quite difficult to take it, because I have been slated for a program in October, on which program he would have been featuring also. And I was just gathering momentum to meet with him and feel how we would be talking on that program. Then all of a sudden, I had this. It was just like a blow. Because I've been writing a few articles around about him, about his tenure during the UN Secretary Generalship, and for such a colossus just to pass away that way. I mean, I just felt that he hadn't finished his job, and he just left.
Now, like you mentioned, we've lost a Ghanaian, we've lost a former UN Secretary General, we've lost a global icon, somebody who contributed specifically to global peace and development. And you've talked about his work. You feel that he hadn't finished what he started. What lessons can we pick, even as Ghanaians, and what can we learn from him?
We can learn a lot from Kofi Annan. His own number one, his own demeanor is a diplomat par excellence. I mean, his demeanor shows everything what a diplomat can be. Secondly, he was the first to try and redefine security, the problem of security in the world, has been by various countries, and therefore we don't have peace. He tried to redefine it, set up a committee to make sure that we redefined it, and we restructured the UN. He didn't succeed though, but everybody now has the feeling that the UN should be restructured. His work against HIV in Africa and elsewhere, his abhorrence against terrorism, and especially state terrorism, especially what we call unilateralism in international relations, when any country just gets up and does whatever he likes in the UN system. I mean, these are things that are monumental, and that these are lessons we must learn from and try and fulfill them in order that we'll have international peace.
Are you still on the line, Prof?
Yes, I'm still on the line.
Okay. Now, you've touched on some of the things he had done, but as a global icon that he was, what do we do, even as a country, to ensure that his legacy lives on? Yes, he has a foundation, but what do we do to ensure that we don't forget the tenets he lived by and emulate the life that he led?
The biggest thing we can do to such icons is to live his memory in us. That is, we can immortalize his name by trying to fulfill what he started and couldn't finish. I've already spoken about international peace, the redefinition of security. What is security at all? And each country tries to define it the way they want. And so we don't have international peace. Can we, as a people of the world, number one? Number two, as a country, start initiatives to ensure that there is peace? Remember his efforts in his book, In Larger Freedom. What he meant was that he wanted the succeeding generation to live in larger freedom. Can we, as a people in Ghana, live this? Can we, as a people of the world, remember the preamble of the UN talks about we the people, can we relive Kofi Annan, immortalizing his name in ensuring that there is global peace?
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I have been speaking to Professor Vladimir Enchidanso, and he's an international relations expert. President Akufo-Addo has also released a statement on behalf of the people of Ghana following the death of the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. Remember, you can also get interactive. Send your comments on our social media platforms. Facebook and Twitter is News on TV3. We have the story now.
The government and people of Ghana, First Lady Rebecca and I, are deeply saddened by the news of the death in Switzerland of one of our greatest compatriots, Mr. Kofi Annan. I extend on behalf of the entire Ghanaian nation our sincere, heartfelt condolences to his beloved widow and to his devoted children, Ama, Kojo and Nina, of this great loss. I am, however, comforted by the information after speaking to Nani Maria that he died peacefully in his sleep. A consummate international diplomat and highly respected former Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Kofi Annan was the first from sub-Saharan Africa to occupy this exalted position. He brought considerable renown to our country by this position and through his conduct and comportment in the global arena. He was an ardent believer in the capacity of the Ghanaian to chart his or her own course onto the path of progress and prosperity. Undoubtedly, he excelled in the various undertakings of his life, leaving in his trail most pleasant memories. His was a life well lived. I have directed that in his honor, Ghana's national flag will fly at half-mast across the country and in all of Ghana's diplomatic missions across the world from Monday, 20th August 2018 for 1 week. Rest in perfect peace, Kofi. You have earned it. God bless.
And shortly, I will be reading a statement by the Secretary General of the United Nations, that's Antonio Guterres, on the passing of the former Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan. And we do have a lot of comments coming in as well. That's his former colleague, and he reads that it is with profound. We'll bring you that shortly as well. Technology really does fail us sometimes. But let's get that for you shortly. And it is with profound sadness that I learned of his passing. In many ways, Kofi Annan was the United Nations. We'll bring you that shortly. And let's take a breather here. Well, before we take that break, let me take that statement from the current UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, and he indicates that in many ways Kofi Annan was the United Nations. He rose from the ranks to lead the organization into the new millennium with matchless dignity and determination. Like so many, I was proud to call Kofi Annan a good friend and mentor. I was deeply honored by his trust in selecting me to serve as UN High Commissioner for Refugees under his leadership. He remained someone I could always turn to for counsel and wisdom, and I know I was not alone. He provided people everywhere with a space of dialogue, for a place for problem solving and the path to a better world. In these turbulent and trying times, he never stopped working to give life to the values of the United Nations Charter. His legacy will remain a true inspiration for all of us. My heartfelt condolence to Nani Annan, their beloved family, and all who mourn the loss of this proud son of Africa who became a global champion for peace and for all humanity. Now we're taking a breather. I will bring you more shortly, but in his soul, rest in peace. Thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Media Live with me, Wendy Lai. Let's look at some more stories. And cocoa farmers in the Setre East district of the Ashanti region are struggling to control the main cocoa pest, Akiti, which causes the disease known as capsids, which is destroying their farms and reducing production. They fear this would reduce production and also affect their livelihoods. They are therefore calling on government to intervene as insecticides distributed by their Greek extension officers are not sufficient for spraying their farms. Selom Amenya visited the district and has filed this report.
Setre East District is the largest district of the Ashanti region with a population of over 62,000. The primary occupation of the people is farming. However, cocoa farmers in the district are in distress as their farms have come under attack from pests. Cocoa pests, especially Akati, have taken over the farms. The cocoa has also been infested by the black pod disease.
This is what the farmers are lamenting over. Apart from the pest causing the cocoa pod or fruit to end up this way, even though it is not yet due, it also has the ability to infest the branches of the trees, which eventually causes them to end up drying up and dying off.
This, they say, is an annual ritual which reduces their yield and goes a long way to affect the country's cocoa production output.
12 acres of land, according to them, is expected to give them close to 25 or 26 bags of cocoa beans. But at the end of the day, they are able to cultivate between 10 and 12 bags, which is a little over 45% of the expected yield.
Kweku Owusu is a 38-year-old cocoa farmer. He tells us he took over the 11-acre cocoa farm from his grandfather, who is now old and weak. He is worried if government does not scale up the supply of insecticides, he might abandon farming. At the beginning of the cocoa season, government supplies us with insecticides and fertilizer, but this is insufficient. Ali Seidu lives in Okaikrom and has this 12-acre cocoa farm. His plight is not different from Kweku Owusu and other cocoa farmers in the Setre East District. He decided to grow plantain to generate income which he and his family survive on, and sometimes use the proceeds to purchase chemicals for the spraying of the cocoa farm. He wants government to intervene. I have 8 children and have adopted 4 others I cater for in school. When the yield is low, paying their school fees becomes burdensome. Hence, government must bail us out. Ghana is expected to produce more than 1 million tons of cocoa in the 2018-2019 cocoa season. The last time the country reached the 1 million ton figure was in the 2010-2011 cocoa season.
Away from farming, some 300 workers of the Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited have petitioned the Industrial and Commercial Workers Union to negotiate on their behalf or their redundancy packages. Now, General Secretary of the Industrial and Commercial Workers Union, Solomon Kute, said negotiations will begin at the end of this month.
Management of Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited has put workers to the bank on a 60-day probationary period. After this, those who will qualify will receive full employment from the managers of the bank. The workers who have sensed danger have petitioned the leadership of Industrial and Commercial Workers Union to lead them in negotiations. The negotiations are expected to begin at the end of this month. General Secretary of ICU, Solomon Kute, pledged to negotiate good packages for the workers.
For now, I should have got individuals who have signed on from the Royal Bank, the Construction Bank, the Unibank, the 2 other banks that were also part of it. The individuals have come. We have over 300 members who are still filling the forms now. So our letter had also gone to the receiver. We have told him about what we represent, and they've also welcomed us. So by next week, we are sending the consolidated numbers that we have to them, and then we'll take the discussions from there.
However, some experts have argued that other unions have failed to negotiate for workers of Capital and UT banks. They again argued that those workers have been given a raw deal and up to now have not received any package. The ICU urged workers of both banks to push further for their packages.
UT and the capital. There was nothing like even time frame for which payments are supposed to be made. That is over a year now. The people have not been paid. Okay. In all ICU Memorandum of Understanding negotiations, we always have an article that talks about mode of payment, whether we are going to pay in installment or we are going to pay outright, and if it's installment, without even attract interest, even what will be the lump sum to be paid. This particular one, we will go with that hindsight.
As part of the negotiations for the workers of Consolidated Bank, workers of Construction Bank are not included in the redundancy arrangement. Solomon Kote explained that some of them had already been paid.
Construction Bank, from what you've heard, is just a year old. It's the youngest among the 5. And it is having a membership which is about 34 staff, okay? So it was able to pay them something by the close of 31st of July, 2018. And just about 6 of them refused to take what was being pushed on their throat. They were giving only 1 month's salary.
Both the leadership of ICU and the management of Consolidated Bank have arranged for another meeting next week to discuss the packages.
The Teachers and Education Workers Union, TEWU, has cautioned the Ghana Education Service to halt the deduction of 10 cedis from the teacher's salary as insurance for their members. At a news conference in Accra, General Secretary Augustine Kabo implored the GES to conduct broader consultations before implementing the deductions.
The Ghana Education Service in July this year deducted 10 cedis from the salaries of its employees as insurance for them. Some of the teacher unions such as NAGRAT, NAT and the Coalition of Concerned Teachers raised concerns about lack of consultations. The 10 cedis deductions from their salary according to the GES will cover some ailments which its employees cannot pay for at the various hospitals. The Teachers and Education Workers Union, TEWU, has asked the GES to stop deducting the 10 cedis from their salary. The General Secretary Augustine Kabo said any further deductions should be done after next month.
We strongly protest against the government where they say it is not compulsory, but they want to put everybody on board and ask those who are not interested to opt out. It should rather be the reverse. They should make forms available for all those who are interested to roll onto this group life insurance and be part, so that those who are not interested, they don't even come into the picture at all.
The union was again concerned about delays in the release of their Tier 2 pension fund to be managed by their fund managers. It argued that the delay has affected its members who will be retiring next few months.
They go to MPRA, they go to Senate, and they refer them to the unions. Meanwhile, these monies are not with us. These are clear issues we want to bring to the public domain and urge that lest the government through MPRA release these funds to the union.
In another development, TEWU has asked the Ministry of Education to consider rolling out motivation packages for its members in the various public schools when the policy on the double tracking commences.
We are very much concerned that some heads of schools, regional and district directors, will always skew what is called staff motivation to favor the teachers, leaving the non-teaching staff. We strongly protest against such actions in the various schools, districts, and regions. Let's be fair to all manner of persons in the workplace and leave discrimination and disfavoring of others against others.
In other news, the Ashanti Region North District says conflicts between nomadic herdsmen and farmers have been brought to a halt. District authorities attributed it to the January 2018 Operation Kaole. Government is set to establish a military base in the district to ensure conflicts between herdsmen and farmers does not occur. Salawamenya has more.
Agogo is the capital of Ashanti Region North District in the Ashanti region. Its eastern border forms part of the regional boundary dividing the Ashanti and Eastern regions. The district covers a total surface area of about 1,217.7 square kilometers, which is about 5% of the total area of the Ashanti region. Perennial clashes between herdsmen and farmers are a constant threat to peace in the area. Lives have been lost and property destroyed in the conflict. In January this year, the Ashanti Akim North District Security Council resolved to forcibly evict all cattle in the area, threatening to shoot every cattle on sight. This was an attempt to enforce a High Court ruling which ordered the evacuation of the animals. 8 months on, the district says Operation Cowleg has yielded results.
120,000 cattle were in the district, and it was very difficult to flush them out. But fortunately for us, we got the support of the president, and we got 3 helicopters, and I can assure that at the moment we have about 95% success. Somebody asking where are they going, but that's not my problem. My problem is I don't need them in my district.
He hinted that some 275 security officers from both police and military were deployed to the district to help in the operation. This, however, came at a cost to the district.
It's been a yearly ritual. They go and they come back. But this time we are putting in measures that they don't come back again. We are building a military base at the Kusan area, so that when the mere president of the military, I can assure you that they will not even dare to come back.
President Kofi Annan revealed that government will set up cattle ranches to help deal with the nomadic herdsmen menace. So far, government, according to the president, has sited some ranches in Afram Plains in the eastern region. However, Agogo is yet to have a cattle ranch.
Away from that story, the Food and Drugs Authority is collaborating with the Food and Agriculture Organization to promote healthy street food. This is aimed at boosting the safety and nutritional value of street food in order to ensure a balanced diet for a healthy living.
Research has shown that a greater proportion of Ghanaians, especially those in urban cities and towns, live on street food. Unfortunately, these street food are prepared under varying conditions. What is more, street food vendors do not consider the nutritional value of their products, thus denying the army of patrons balanced diet. Reports suggest food safety and nutrition compromise, especially in street foods, have been associated with a number of foodborne diseases. The FAO-FDA initiative seeks to stimulate demand for balanced diet.
It is also an undeniable fact that these street foods have become a crucial medium for poverty eradication. Thus, it is vital to support this fast-growing sector to meet safety standards.
The project will also motivate street food vendors to register in a public database to allow for resource-efficient food monitoring and inspection system for street food vendors across the country.
We wanted to make sure that the food that we buy from the street vendor people are safe, it is nutritious, and we can ensure that it is also hygienic, because from morning to evening when we are at work, that is what most of us eat.
The new initiative to be piloted in Accra will see street food vendors being graded to generate healthy competition.
So what we want to do is to motivate vendors to formalize their position in a way that also benefits them in terms of business, in terms of market competition, of market advantages. It's not just asking them, okay, get licensed and train and pay your taxes, but it's also, okay, if you do all this, you will have an advantage on the market.
Some food vendors share their thoughts on the new initiative.
If indeed the government can really improve this and then make sure that we can be trained, and they had a trainers training as to how we can also train our members and the staffs, then I think things will go, in the proper way.
So for us, nutrition is the key. And for you to eat well, you eat for benefits. You don't just eat. Otherwise, the question I ask is, what is food? Why do we eat? We eat for its nutritional benefits. So you eat in the right quantity and at the right time. And so food is medicine.
Let's head to the Ashanti region, where farmers in Bekwai are losing several thousand tons of perishable farm produce due to the bad road network. Eva Atibuka reports that the health and other economic activities are also badly affected.
Farming is the mainstay of the people of Ashanti Bekwai. However, poor roads linking communities to market centers are frustrating efforts of farmers in maximizing their yields. The chiefs and people of the area who met the Special Initiatives Minister, who was on a tour of ongoing projects under the 1 million per constituency fund, were worried a larger chunk of their farm produce gets locked up on farms.
Our roads are very bad. Meanwhile, we cultivate cash crops here. How then do we survive when we cannot cart our produce from the farms to the market centers?
Residents also lamented that access to health care is a problem.
Commercial drivers refuse to ply the road, especially when it rains. So some sick people do lose their lives because vehicles will not even ply at night.
Special Initiatives Minister Howard Compson assured the people of a resolution to their challenges.
My ministry will collaborate with the roads ministry to discuss how best we can improve on your roads, so to boost food production and also increase economic activities.
Meanwhile, the Bekwai constituency will benefit from a solar-powered limited mechanized water projects and toilet facilities under the 1 million per constituency fund. The chiefs and people expressed their gratitude to government for ensuring the projects are executed on time.
You're still watching Media Live. Next, we have sports with Yao Ufusulabi. Next, we have entertainment. Now, in entertainment this afternoon, BBNZ live record label signees Kojo, Q and Shaker are the latest to add their voice to the feud between the late Ebony's father and her former manager, Bullet. The duo believe that Buhaha is tarnishing the memories people have about the late songstress.
Despite being individual musicians, the rappers have worked together on several music projects. Notably among them is the Pen and Paper album.
Pen and paper, pen and paper, all I did here be instrumental pen and paper.
The album Pen and Paper attracted a lot of attention to the unique creativity of the duo. The warm embrace from fans encouraged them to drop more singles such as Mama E,
Mama E, Mama E, Mama E, Mama E, Mama E, Mama E.
In an interview with TV3, the Pen and Paper hitmakers expressed their displeasure on the manner both Ebony's former manager, Bullet, and her father are washing their dirty linen in public.
This is an issue between two people that they could have resolved behind the scenes, you understand? If it was something that they really wanted to resolve and it was just about not cheating each other or whatever, they could have taken it to court, settled it quietly, so that we can go on loving and respecting Nanahema the way that we've come to, you understand? I don't agree with how they've handled the whole situation, but it's not reflective of our industry, because we wouldn't do that. A lot of people wouldn't do that.
I mean, he said everything. It doesn't affect the parties, the two parties, as in Bullet and his dad alone, and Bullet and Ebony's dad alone. I mean, it affects us out there because, I mean, it's the media, social media. Everybody's is listening to and watching what is happening. So, when I get messages like that from people outside, I'm like, yo, Charlie, this one, they're no good. I mean, like he said, it's supposed to be an inside thing. It shouldn't come out. They're supposed to solve it in between themselves, because Charlie, and it doesn't give Ebony a good name as well, you know, because Charlie, we all the love her.
And now let's check out how cartoonist Tilapia also captured the week's major news happenings from his lenses. Before we wrap up, we have some of your comments on the death of Kofi Annan. And Enyona Makushika says, we are fast losing our best statesman. May his soul rest in peace, and he sure is going to be missed. Osei Bernard Benjamin says, live to leave a legacy. Juvi Anku asked that great leader, may your soul rest in perfect peace. Eminem Jr. says, perfect peace. And Kweku Asamoah says that great man, intelligent and selfless, Mr. Annan will live forever. Cecilia Jan asked that may his soul rest in perfect peace. Amen. And Sewa also asked that rest in peace, sir. A quick run through our headline stories. And former United Nations Secretary General and Peace Laureate Kofi Annan dies in Geneva, Switzerland. He was 80. And thousands await rescue at Kerala in southern India as flood toll tops 200. That'll be all for this afternoon. We have more news at 7 on News 360. My name is Wendy Lai. Do have a lovely afternoon. Thanks for watching.